Yo, what's going on, guys? Today we're going to be working with an interesting concept of an idea, which is tracing tension throughout the body. So if you've seen my videos before, you know that that's typically what we do, but we are going to be starting up here in the quad. Now in the quad, this is where the primary issue was known to us, and this is where we decided to start warming up the tissue. So what we're doing is we are using the tend unit to alleviate and relax the tissue, and it's a pattern that you're going to see throughout this video. We use the tend unit to warm up and then palpate through. You can palpate while the body is still cold, but you won't get nearly as deep as whenever it is more relaxed. Right here in the quad, I can see visually that it is extremely tight on the rectus femoris area, and I, by palpating, was able to feel that there was a lot of tension here in the adductor. I put it into a medium mode with the tend unit, then went up to the next level, which is high, and you can see how the tissue in the body is reacting to the tend unit. You can see the muscle was extremely tight here in the adductor and vastus lateralis. Now what we're doing is we are going through the vastus lateralis and working our way up into the adductor. Okay, so what we did, we warmed up the tissue with the tend unit. We're using the heated scraper to detail a little bit more. And then I was using, once I felt that the tissue was relaxed, I was using my elbow and forearm to alleviate the area. So the adductor in the area, as you can see, is pulling on the vastus lateralis. And you can see little fibers pulling towards the erector spinae, the rectus femoris. And so through this practice, you can see how densification in the hyaluronic acid can create a buildup, and this buildup bands out and makes these what we sometimes call adhesions, and it sticks to other muscles, and muscles that stick to one another that do opposing actions cause what's known as muscular inhibition. So that's why it's so crucial that you work out a lot of the tissues and the issues with your tissues. Right there you can see that ball that is in the rectus femoris. The adductor immediately is looking a lot more relaxed. And I'm checking to see where it feels on the side of the knee, because typically with a lot of people, whenever they have a lot of vastus medialis pain, sorry about that. So whenever people have vastus medialis pain, meaning the quad that is closest towards the inner portion, they typically have knee pain. So whenever I work the vastus medialis, there's typically a lot of tension around the knee, and it can also band over into the rectus femoris, and as well as cause tension to the adductors. And right here I'm polishing out, but rather than just using my hands, sometimes the vibration tool can do more reps per second, and I can do a hold. So what I'm trying to do right here is I'm putting the vibration unit to put pressure so that way I can't move the tissue when I move and scrape through. When there is tight tissue, sometimes what happens is that you'll scrape and it'll just flop over, right? And then what that means is that you can't really put any pressure, no trigger points, no nothing, and so the tissue won't really ever let go. And so you see, when you put pressure on the opposite side of that muscle belly, and then you scrape, the muscle belly has nowhere to go because it's being held on the opposite end by some kind of pressure. Sometimes I use my hand, other times I use the 10 unit. And again, we're still working on that banding that we're seeing. There we go, and then tracing upwards. The banding's looking a lot better, a lot more loose. This is, it is, I believe it's called Rainer technique. And Rainer technique is where I just move back and forth with my hand. And it's kind of like you're just chopping it back and forth with just pressure. And that, there you go, helps the muscle belly to kind of relax. It adds a parasympathetic response to the muscle, which is very interesting. So using Rainer technique with all of the tools that I'm using, sometimes Rainer is just that final polish that you need to really get the muscle to just relax. Now what we're doing is we're doing myofascial decompression, and we are using these cups to pull apart the muscle, the fascia, that possibly could stick to one another. So that's what it's called. It's myofascial. So myo
How's
is
the pressure? Good.
muscle, fascial is connective tissue, and decompression is to pull apart. Now these silicone cups, they really work really well whenever you're putting them around areas that are a little bit less likely to be used well with, like the plastic cups that I have, because the plastic cups really can't get the angles and the corners and the crevices that these silicone cups can. Now in some of these areas that I'm putting it here, I could put a regular cup, but I was just like already using the silicone, so I thought I would just use it. Now you can see that the fascia is being pulled. I did that for the thumbnail. And now we're going to put the PEMF, which is going to help the red light. After 5 minutes, we remove the PEMF, remove the red light cups, and you can see that there's some darkening area in the areas that we were cupping. And in fact, that wasn't the only. You could see all the way through that, even on the areas that we hadn't worked yet. So we worked around the knee on the medial portion. Now on the outside, we really didn't work too much, and you can definitely tell. So people sometimes say that there is no correlation with no darkening, but you can tell that we actually worked on the inner portion, and on this outer portion we really didn't do too much, and you can already see the difference in coloration. And why is that? Because fascia connects to everything. Fascia can even restrict your blood flow in certain areas, and when there's tight fascia and then you add a decompressing area to it, the decompression and the pulling for a long period of time, if there's sensitivity to bruising, which when you have restriction to your blood flow, there is a higher chance of bruising, then you obviously get bruises. That's why on the other side you don't really see it, and on this side you do. Now some people say that there's no correlation between the two, but I think it's pretty apparent that most of the time it is. But sometimes people don't believe that, and that's okay. We're always learning, and this is a evolving science all the time. So what I'm doing here now is I'm practicing my my lymphatic drainage, and I'm working the fascia towards or away from the lymph node, because I was talking with a lymphatic specialist, and they said one of the things that clogs up lymphs for some reason is when you just go ahead and flush the lymph out then it won't really flush out. You have to flush it away from the body, from the lymph node. And then what you do is after you flush the lymph away from the lymph node, you then flush the lymph node back towards, you flush the lymph back towards the lymph node. So again, so basically we're pushing the liquid lymph away from its exit area, and then we're pushing it back towards the exit area to make sure that we gather as much as possible. And when I'm putting pressure right here and I'm draining out all that lymph in the area, we are doing it with the lightest touch, or at least I am attempting to, because I have very, very heavy hands. And when we do this with the light touch, you can actually feel, it almost feels like sand, or the feeling of your hands waking up after they've fallen asleep. You feel it underneath your fingertips from all the lymph being moved. It's a very, very interesting technique, and I'm still learning it. And right here I can feel that the lymph is definitely been reduced quite a bit. And early on I didn't record it, but she did have some issues with some adipofascial visual cues. So the adipofascial visual cues were present, and then after doing this lymphatic drainage, I saw an immediate reduction in that adipofascial restriction. Some people call it different names like lipedema, but there's so many things that it could be. It could be cellulite, it could be lipedema, it could be there's Crohn's disease, I believe that's what it's called. And all of those factors can be all different types of adipofascial restrictions, and they all relate to fascia. And even lymph, which has hyaluronic acid inside of it as well. So now we're moving on to the next area. We are moving down into the shin. And why are we working the shin area? Well, because on the shin, on both sides, you have muscle, and those muscles can again band out with the fascia that's surrounding the area. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to loosen up the entire area, and you can see where it's banding right there over into the tibialis anterior. And then from the tibialis anterior, if it's very, very tight, it can actually band over into your calf. So we're warming up. What I should have done was immediately as we're warming up, and if I know I'm going to scrape, then I turn on the heated scraper so that way it's completely warm and it feels nice and hot. So that way we can melt away a lot of that hyaluronic acid buildup, densification, or simply knots. And we can just polish out those knots, make it nice and clean. And so this is the process that we're going to be doing for this area. Again, we're tracing out tension. So when I feel tension, we just move over and we start working, detailing that small little area. We're doing it all the way down. And right here I can definitely, with the other hand, I could feel that there was tension right in that spot. I applied the cups, but it was too much. And so whenever it's too much, it's very important that we have communication with our client. And it's very important, as like if you are a client and you plan to be a client to get a massage work, or if you're a massage therapist, it's so important to have good communication. Communication is key. It helps us avoid injuring a client, and it also gives us feedback on how to adjust the massage, so that way we can bring as much relief as possible without breaking the pain threshold, because everybody has a threshold. Some people have more than others and others have less. Doesn't mean necessarily that you're weak or that you have It's something that you should be sorry about. No. All of these things are completely normal. It's completely normal for you to have a threshold. And it's very important for us to listen to the body so that way we don't cause more injury. It's the same thing as if you were touching a stove. The reason why you feel pain is because your body's telling your hand, hey, don't put yourself there because it's very painful and you can hurt yourself. And it's the same thing. We want to listen to the signals that our clients give and what the body tells us. And so when things twitch, if there's a very, very like tense reaction to something, we soften up and we slowly work in. Now here we're working on the metatarsal area. Metatarsals are more tendon or ligament. I believe it's tendon because I think muscle connects to it. But regardless, tendon and ligaments both have fascia that surround them. So if it has fascia around it, chances are it's got hyaluronic possibility of buildup. And so we work lightly throughout the area. And that's why you can hear that crunch. And it's not because I'm putting a lot of pressure. It's that hyaluronic acid that's densed up the area, and it's not allowing the metatarsals to really glide the way that they should. And so you hear that. I try to relax the hand and just lightly scrape. I'm not trying to put a lot of pressure, and for me, with being having heavy hands, it's always very, very difficult for me to be doing this. So after we work the top portion of the foot, we work the sides, and this will lead us to the bottom of the foot. I must have heard a cue, heard something, trying to figure out, oh, it was the phone. Had a phone call and it was nothing important, so turn that off and get right back to detailing the foot. And now it's feeling much more relaxed. Going in through the top, double checking to make sure we have all of the knots, aka knots, removed. And I felt, as soon as I felt it right, I just, boom, it's like, okay, let me go ahead and scrape that. Because again, my hands will be really heavy, but with the scraper, it can be heavy, but light, right? And boom, right there, I feel it. Nice. Just so much more relaxing the ankle. You're going to be able to feel like they move a lot lighter. And by removing the densification, this will allow the body to align itself to the best of its abilities. Right here, it's been 5 minutes, so we remove the cups. And we've worked this area a little bit more. Where we didn't was on the bottom down there. And you could see that it definitely needed a little bit more work. But for the response that it gave, it's not a bad response. The calf in the back looks fairly good. And it seems like there's a line being drawn from the IT band, and it flows all the way down and through the shin. And from the shin, it pulls over to the mid-calf. And that tells us that there's a lot of densification there, and there's a lot of restriction, and that this pattern of pain flowed through the body. Again, double checking to make sure everything's good. Usually when I have my phone on Do Not Disturb, if it's a family member, it'll go through. So just checking to make sure everybody's good, and then we go straight back to work, and we're working that tibialis anterior. Notice the cup is on. Turn it off real quick. And let's continue to warm up this calf, or I'm sorry, this tibialis anterior area. tibialis in the area. Because what we do to one side, we want to kind of do to the other. And it seems like this area is more relaxed. Even though we're getting a little bit of audible cues in there, the general area is really, really, really relaxed. And those little audible cues will dissipate pretty quickly. It doesn't really like spread out the way that it was spreading on the other side. Palpation and then working. Palpate, see how it feels, see how the body reacts. Feels pretty good. We're doing a final strip. I think something that happened, I don't remember that day very well, but yeah. So now we are going through, and the interesting thing is that when I'm going up through the calf, you can see what's going on with the leg, and the leg is actually firing as I'm working through. And so what I was trying to do is I was trying to find where that fire, where the trigger point inside of the calf area was at, and what it was causing that firing of the quadriceps. As soon as I found the spot, I began to scrape. You can almost see how it causes the whole leg to vibrate, and it causes contractions within the quadriceps. And the idea is that if we loosen it up, there should be less and less reaction. So go through again. No firing. Shift the angle. And let's check it again, just to make sure. We can hear audible cues, but it sounds a lot better. And there was less firing, which is always a good thing. Now we're going to go into the calf. So we saw that there was tension in this calf, so we decided that it was time to shift over. As I'm working the calf, I will put it in different positions, and I will angle myself so that way, one, I can have a little nice rest stop, but two, the more important thing is the client and the angle that their hamstring and their calf will be in. Different angles will bring out different tensions in the muscle, and this allows us to find deeper things that might not pop out if it's just too relaxed. And right here you can see how the soleus was just popping out as I was working the gastrocnemius. So the top portion of the calf and the side was actually popping out a little bit more. Now this is where I'm using that same technique that I mentioned earlier that I use with the tendon sometimes, is I'll put pressure on the opposite side of the muscle belly and I'll scrape through so that way the muscle belly cannot move. This is because I'm working one of the gastrocnemius. So the gastrocnemius has two heads, and right now I'm working the medial head. Using heat, we're using heat to just scrape through and get that area to relax. Looks more relaxed, and you can definitely see on the lateral portion, which is the one where the camera can actually see, you can see how that gastro head is just very, very tight. Like you can see it visibly pulling, even almost to the knee, it looks like. But this one is looking a lot more better. Still needs a lot of work though. But I must have felt something because I continued to work and polish that side and trace it up into that hamstring. Yeah, and that hamstring has a ball. Definitely in the middle of the hammy. Right there, yep. Saw it almost immediately as I was working, and I recognized it. I mean, that's just a mound. And if I push upwards, you can see how it pulls. It's weird because the mound is like, it was palpatable. But when you pushed on it, you could actually see how it moves the entire hamstring just from the adduction or the adductors. And so when the act of adduction happens, which means you put your legs together, it can cause your hamstrings to cramp up, and why it was so crucial for this client to get this work. So then I flexed the leg. One thing that I wish I would have done better on this session is that I would have paid a little bit more attention to the outside calf muscle. Just a little bit more, because there was some definite tension that I could see there. But I mean, for what it's worth, the amount of tracing that we've done at this point, from going, quad down to the shin, and then recognizing that it's pulling to the calf muscle, and then all the way up to the hamstring. Still, me being how I am, I wish I would have tackled that on a little bit better. But as you can see on right here, we are working the adductor area and the medial hamstring. And now that it's eased up a little bit, now you can see some of that adipofascial restriction that was there. You can see it much more clearly on the lateral portion of this IT band to lateral portion of the hamstring. So there was needing a lymphatic flush to the hamstring as well. But as we were getting closer and closer to finding more issues and working through these issues together, time was beginning to run out. This was about an hour session, and clipping it down, I recorded maybe about 45 minutes of the session. And here and there were some sounds that went off, or I was putting things back. And so we clipped down all of that. And sometimes there was some communication that was between me and the client. And I won't necessarily show everything, but we got it down to about 30 minutes. So we didn't really trim off too much. So again, working straight down this hamstring all the way up. You can see the calf, and this is one of the reasons why I like to have my monitor on, so I can recognize these issues. But in order to get as much done as possible, my favorite tool to use is the Tucksin therapy. We do taps, rhythmic taps, and it helps to activate the parasympathetic response, so that way the area can at least relax, and all the work that we did to the quad doesn't get offset by the hamstring. But once again, I'm John of GreaterTherapeutics. Leave a comment, let me know what you think about this session, and make sure you like, you subscribe, you share. And if there's anything that you think we can improve on, please let me know.